So, again, this week we have another very short gospel. And here Jesus gives us, as he describes, the new commandment. And it's simply this: to love one another. As I have loved you, so you should love one another. And you might be like, all right, I got that one, right? This new commandment, love, I'm a loving person. This is an easier one. Not so fast. The reality is that love has a painful component to it. There's a cost to love. If we don't understand that, we are coming from a different ballpark than what Jesus is coming from here as he gives this new commandment. The last few weeks we've been talking about wounds, our wounds. If you've been here, you know that we've said wounds are simply life experiences where the enemy ends up whispering lies to us. And it can create a dark narrative. It can form a dark narrative in our lives. It can even we can see it as part of our identity. It can affect the way that we see others. It affects the way we see ourselves, this dark narrative. It can even affect the way that we see God. And all of those dark narratives shaping that, we saw that in Tammy Peterson last week, that man on the airplane sharing the dark narrative of him forming when he was 17 when his mother took her own life. Why last week we talked about the importance for us is to create space to listen to another voice, the Good Shepherd, so as to receive truth, those lies that we have, those dark narratives that create in all of our heads, for it to be unburdened by the voice of truth, the Good Shepherd. You might ask those still, like why have we not taken 4 weeks spending time on wounds, right? And to be honest with you, I didn't intend to do that. Normally our preaching series, we have lined up months in advance and say, hey, these 4 or 5 weeks are going to be on this. That was not this on wounds. But really with the response that I've been hearing from you of it, like, okay, this resonating here, this hitting a spot. But ultimately, why are we spending 4 weeks on this? It's because of our gospel that we just heard. The new commandment, to love one another. Because our wounds, our woundedness, it affects our capacity to love. There's barriers there's tons of barriers that affect the ability for us to love our spouse, our family members, our neighbor. Tons of blockages that keep us from love. The biggest one is our inability many times to receive love. Or as I pointed out, the Harvard professor, as he looked and studied over the course of 20 years on his happiness study, the number one thing he said that affects people's flourishment or happiness is people's difficulty in allowing themselves or tolerating being loved themselves, to receive love purely. So when we say love there's a painful component in it, is because love requires vulnerability. It requires sacrifice. It requires entering into another person's brokenness or letting another person into our brokenness. And you see, that can be painful, but that's the very thing love wants to do, is to break through those spots. You know, there was earlier on in my priesthood, probably about 5 or 7 years ago now, there was a middle-aged woman that came in to see me. She was a faithful Catholic, attended attended masses on Sundays, regular confession, a few times a year. But when she came in, she experiencing a ceiling to her prayer life, or like a ceiling or a blockage in her relationship with God, but also, she said, with her husband as well. And as we began to talk, she recalled that her husband earlier on in their marriage, those first couple years of their marriage, would make comments like to her, "I feel like you're holding something back on me. I feel like you're not letting me see parts of your heart." And she would just brush it off, like, what are you talking about? And her husband eventually stopped bringing it up as their marriage went on. And it wasn't until later in her life, she's coming in now, realizing how much she was affected by an absent father growing up. It wasn't a father who left the home and left the family, but he was emotionally or physically unavailable, distant. And she went on and she shared with me and how throughout her teen years and her young adult years, she had a series of painful relationships with other men that caused her a great amount of suffering and a great amount of woundedness. And what she discovered is that she had a deep sense in her of being unseen, of being unworthy of love. Now think back to a couple weeks ago, that list of wounds. In her, a wound of abandonment, a wound of rejection that had taken deep root in her. And remember that list, those carry lies of, "I'm not loved," or "I'm not wanted." And so she would go from guy to guy to guy in her teen and young adult years, trying to fill that ache. So what looked like promiscuity was really just a desperate grasping of wanting to be loved, of wanting to be known. And, doing that, it left her, it just kind of piled on each other, left her with an incredible amount of shame then, of feeling bad, that she's bad, that I'm dirty, even a hatred for parts of herself. All of that she brought into her marriage. Now you can see those comments from her husband early on in the marriage. "I feel like you're holding parts of your heart from me. I feel like you're holding something back from me." A blockage of not her just being able to give love, but her being able to receive love. There are plethora of blockages that keep us from fulfilling the new commandment that Jesus gives us to love one another. To fulfill, or in other places he says, the greatest commandment. But there's no greater blockages than us being able to receive love first. Ability to receive love purely. It's the hardest thing for most people is to tolerate being loved at a very deep level. Those wounds, the reason that is the wounds create barriers. It isolates our heart. And it makes then God's love or other people's love feel painful or feel threatening. Why? Because what does authentic love want to do? It wants to go deep. It wants to break through those barriers, those dark narratives that we have set up. And that's a painful process for that to happen, which is why oftentimes we shy away from it. Real love, authentic love. And we turn to either from guy to guy to guy, addictions, but even good things, success, achievement, staying busy. These things too can keep us from living at a deeper level, experiencing a deeper love. And it keeps us from that kind of love going up against those barriers, those tender spots. But those are the very spots for restoration. Those are the very spots that the Lord wants to meet us with an incredible amount of tenderness. In the second reading from the book of Revelation, you got the Lamb there from the throne that simply makes that bold, beautiful, hopeful statement I make all things new. The restoration has begun, and the Lord wants and can do that in our hearts, making all things new and making us whole. Parts of us that are broken, maybe even parts of us that if we admit that's like, I have a hatred for myself even in this spot. He makes new and restores. And to help with that path of healing, we didn't plan on offering this summer, but on the cusp of this, we'll be offering an 8-part series here at the parish called Healing the Whole Person. It's led by Dr. Bob Schutz and Sister Miriam James. They go around the country putting on these Healing the Whole Person conferences. We actually had hosted them here 4 or 5 years ago for a weekend, but they also have an 8-part series that you can just watch. And we'll be putting those on and what they do is it explores those wounds that we carry, many of which that we're not possibly even aware that we carry them. Just like that woman, not even aware, but the Lord bringing restoration into those spots and into those parts. You know what helped that woman that I mentioned? One of the key things in Springboard that began to help her to go deeper was attending one of these weekends in the context that we'll have this 8-part series. It began to open things up in her. It began for her to be able to receive love purely in those spots where she found it difficult, if not impossible. Healing takes time, though. She didn't experience it all at once. Healing takes time. It's so important for us to remember this. Jesus in the gospel, he healed people physically, like instantly. The person who was lame and couldn't walk, get up and walk, and he just started walking. The blind received their sight. Over and over in the gospel, Jesus healed physically right away. But on the level of the heart, even Jesus in the gospels, on the level of the heart, it often took time. It was a process. The Lord is patient. He stays with you. He walks with you. For some of us, attending a series like this that we're going to have, Healing the Whole Person, for some of us, it is actually a very key, important, critical piece of your healing journey, is attending something like this. To receive love at a very deep, pure level into those tender spots to make us whole. Just close with this. What we're talking about, this is the biggest, most critical, important thing. Jesus says this is the new commandment. In other places, he says it's the greatest commandment, to love God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love yourself as your neighbor. Or today he says it's a new commandment, as I have loved you, love others. This is what we're talking about. And you might just say, "Oh, I got it. That's easy. Well, I'm a loving person. I got it." Not so fast. Not so fast. And perhaps it all begins, maybe surprisingly, with ourselves receiving love first, more purely, letting it reach those wounded spots. So consider, pray with, ask the Lord Jesus if he wants you to attend that this summer, and have the courage to let Jesus do the healing, making us whole, because you can't give what you haven't first received.